You can take care of this place from now on. You better not let it fold before I return. The one who said this was the previous owner of the bar that Gordeau actually hung out at when he was younger. The bar basically became a place where he was comfortable being at, and soon felt like another home for him. He entered the bar out of pure boredom one day, and even if that doesn't sound unusual, the owner welcomed him with a simple warm glass of milk, and that's something he will never forget. One day, the owner up and left, thus leaving the bar in Gordeau's hands. At first, Gordeau didn't feel like he was fit for the job, but in his words, once he got into it, it became fun. This eventually became an important job for him, his life's work, and it's all thanks to the previous owner, his master, that he's not jobless or even homeless. He was grateful that he was able to meet him in life. Then came a day that changed his life forever. The day the void came. One night when work ended, he went to take the banner in, but he felt something was lurking behind in the alley. He walked towards it to see what it was, and the best way he could describe it was just it was a monster. Don't get involved with dangerous people. That's the trick to surviving this business. He followed his master's teachings and ran away as fast as he could. There's more to that story, but sadly, even Gordeau cuts it short in his chronicle mode, saying it will just be long and pathetic, so he leaves it at that. Then he joined an in-birth group. His life didn't change much, only the customers coming into the bar did. How it all began was simple too. Gordeau came into the bar one day and simply asked him if he was a wielder and that they were comrades. This was their first interaction, and soon they would hang out with each other a lot more. A wielder is basically just another term for an in-birth. They would make their names known just by simply beating up other people in the Hollow Night, and the name Amnesia was created. It's not really said how that name was chosen. Even Gordeau and Hilda doesn't know how it happened, but they still rocked it. During the fight with Bon Kikai and Amnesia, he was faced with something he didn't want to believe. His friend Roger turned into a void. He tried his best to reach out to him, calling his name and telling him to drop the act and just answer him already. But even Enkidu said that was no longer the person he knew. It was merely a monster. Even Hilda knew that something was not right with what was standing in front of them. The vessel of Roger kept walking towards them all, and Gordeau couldn't even move. It wasn't because he was scared of what Roger became, but because he's the one that invited him to this night. He was filled with guilt, and even started to think that if it would be okay to die by Roger's hands right now. Then the thought came to him. Was he even able to kill Roger? He hesitated, and kept trying to get Roger to get back into shape, but was eventually stopped by his enemy, Ogre. Ogre actually throws himself into Roger's way, saying to everyone there that he doesn't have the strength to stop this thing. He accepted this as his fate since he did lose to Hilda, and asked Enkidu for a final request, to take Hilda and Gordeau and get out of there as fast as possible. And the same goes for Strix and Zohar if he sees them by chance. Enkidu agrees and picks up the exhausted Hilda and told Gordeau to run. But he didn't. He couldn't just leave his friend behind, the one that he invited after all. Roger's vessel started attacking Gordeau and Ogre with heavy attacks over and over. Seeing Gordeau not being able to move, Ogre kicked him away as far and as hard as possible. But it was in that moment when Roger's vessel attacked and pierced Ogre's body. He saved Gordeau's life, even if for a moment, His last words to Gordeau was to make sure to tell Hilda this action, and that they're now even. Ogre's body collapsed, and it was soon dragged by the tentacle and was wrapped around in a thick, dark fog. Ogre was completely gone. Gordeau nearly snapped out of his shock and was about to make a run for it, but then he collapsed. The damage dealt by the void, the emotional fatigue, and the amount of EX consuming him. His body was heavy, and he accepted his death at that moment. But right behind Roger was a sudden burst of flames. Roger was engulfed by fire out of nowhere. Gordeau didn't understand what was happening. Everything was hazy for him. Roger then falls to his knees, and Gordeau saw a sword being raised up right behind him. He screamed at the person who raised the blade to stop, but in his mind he knew someone had to end Roger's suffering. But he still didn't want to come to the reality that Roger was going to be gone forever. The deed was done. The head of the void fell to the ground, and at the same time, its entire body went up in flames and became nothing but ashes. Roger was gone before Gordeau's own eyes. The one who did this walked up to Gordeau. She wasn't surrounded by flames. It was her clothing that made her have that look. The woman says this: "People who gather around the abyss were all foolish and should know their place." She bids Gordeau farewell and tells him to never show his face in the Hollow Knight ever again. But as she walks away, he tried to catch up to her. The one who killed Roger was in front of his eyes. Seeing this though, the woman says one last thing. If he's gonna try to get revenge for his friend, to just stop. Also saying that someone had to end him, and she knows that Gordeau understood this fully. In his head, he was upset. He was complaining when someone did the dirty work for him. The work he couldn't have done at all. Frustration built up inside Gordeau, and he soon fainted after, by the ashes of Roger. Enkidu then comes back and rescues the unconscious Gordeau, and that's how the battle to the top came to an end. Weeks passed, and Gordeau made a full recovery physically, but he was always caught looking at the bar's door, hoping that it was all a dream and that Roger would walk through. Chaos and Hilda were there, breaking down the situation again regarding Roger. Chaos kept repeating that Roger's death can't really be confirmed, especially with how the power of manifestation works, but also said that they should find a path for his return. He explains that there is this old tale about a void god that went back and forth between the Hollow Knight and rebirths. Maybe there was a chance to bring Roger back, and that was the end of that. Even Hilda was upset. She just looked mad about it all. Roger being gone, and even she had second thoughts on aiming to become a rebirth. But her will to become one was still there, saying how she's not as weak as Roger. But even says that when she becomes one, she'll try to find a way to bring Roger back. Hearing this, Gordeau went silent. He wasn't usually one to just say no to these two, but he didn't want to lose Hilda to the Abyss either, another friend of his. But what was next for Amnesia? After all that happened, Gordeau decided to take time for himself. Time to think, to reflect. So, he decided to leave Amnesia. Hilda was extremely upset with this decision, but Chaos held her back and came to understand why he needed this. Gordeau even says to Hilda, what's the point of having a member that actually has no will to fight? They accepted his leave with hopes that one day he'll come back to Amnesia. And with that, they leave the bar and let Gordeau have his time alone. He continues to maintain the bar and acts alone now and some nights, but he always finds himself looking at the bar's doors, hoping that one day Roger would come back to visit.